This video is addressed at a special kind of person, the gender, quote-unquote, egalitarian. The individuals that refuse to condone feminism or the MRM not because of any direct disagreements, but because they think that any movement advocating for the rights of a specific group is inherently wrong. The reasoning behind that is, if you call yourself a member of a group that advocates for the rights of a certain demographic, you are thusly not advocating for all equally, and this contradicts the ideal of equality. It is then so that the MRM and feminism cannot be endorsed, by virtue of existing. From that, it follows that you may not be truly for equality unless you exclusively call yourself egalitarian, or humanist, or whatever the claimer identifies as, a label for someone who supposedly advocates for everyone equally. I will just experiment with this by assuming its side, so you'll find with its inherent conclusion, then I will explain my thoughts on the matter. I hope the viewer can take something out of this video. So, let's set out with this fantasy scenario. Here, egalitarians have formed a group called One and are getting themselves warmed up to do their business. I must point out that such organization even happening would be highly unlikely in my own view, but, for the egalitarian, this is not a possibility but a necessity in their game plan, and as such this is a valid situation to argue from. Leslie, the leader of the newly founded organization, is to choose what they're going to rally for. He decides that they're going to ban circumcision. He communicates this to the other members. Oh, but what's that? Half of them don't agree. They think it is not a bad thing and thus isn't an issue to be solved. Those who don't think that way remain in the organization, while the rest forms another organization, too. These disagreements on what should be done, disagreements of action, quickly tear down the egalitarian foundations into 100 different groups based on what they are doing. Some are concerned with parental alienation, some are connected with violence against women, some are concerned with the gendering in toy shops. This generalizes for any situation. When it comes to doing, groups tend to divide until they are sufficiently unified in a cause to do something for it. Fair enough. This is not yet a good argument against taking egalitarianism as a label. It only shows that a unified egalitarian organization would not work. These organizations still can all take egalitarianism and only egalitarianism as their label, right? Let's see. The organization about violence against women starts noticing they have similar principles with the organization about mental rape of women and girls and the organization about sexism in toy shops. They then decide to form a coalition called Organization of Sexism Against Women. These higher groups are consistently formed from what the lower groups have in common, going up in abstraction and moving away from action to thoughts. They are set up until you've got a full-fledged abstract movement that helps balance and promote its action-oriented branches and is maintained by them in return. Now, can we impose a label, egalitarianism, which is at the highest abstraction level, for everybody who agrees to some form of equality? Yes, you can call them egalitarians, you can call them humanists, whatever. This is almost useless as everybody claims to be for equality despite having very little in common. Feminists believe to be fighting for equality, MRAs believe to be fighting for equality. At best it does help a little by making it clear that you're not dealing with one who does not even adhere to ideals of justice. However, once egalitarian is used as an exclusive label, it is actively harmful. You are placing egalitarian at the top of the hierarchy and prohibiting anything that should surge below it. High abstraction, chances are that nothing gets done. You are turning off the light that labels shed upon groups, the clarity that makes them organize under common grounds. It is impossible to democratically organize to do anything without new names and groups naturally expressing themselves, and by denying that you are suppressing any actual progress for a pretty name. In fact, if anything were to happen in such a scenario, it would be the top pushing its contents to the bottom, causing ideology to drive facts and actions rather than the other way around. There is no consensus on egalitarianism. Having an artificially unified egalitarian movement at the top would inevitably result in a group that appropriates egalitarian, a label that everyone agrees with, to themselves to force others to comply and suppress dissenting opinions on basis of being not egalitarian, pushing their own ideas from top down while not allowing new ones to sprout. Given how egalitarian groups with free discussion tend to divide in the first place, this tends to require some sort of authoritarian measures to maintain. It is also something feminists have long been trying to do, conflate being egalitarian to being feminist so that nobody can disagree with feminism, even though it really is based on feminist theory, essentially putting feminism at that very position. But that's another topic. In reality, MRAs and feminists are both egalitarians. They just see the world in completely different ways and have different views of equality. Feminists believe that men have oppressed women for their own benefit throughout history, while most MRAs believe both men and women have always been bent on favoring women. Most MRAs, not all. Some traditional conservatives identify as MRAs, for instance. Right now there is no consensus for MRAs in that regard. Nonpartisan MRAs call the traditionalist Tratkins and the traditionalists call the nonpartisan MRAs leftist MRAs, and there is plenty of tension between the two factions, so a divide is forming already. My point is that admitting that these differences exist and allowing them to organize and oppose each other is extremely important. It allows for discussion and debate, and for people to have informed opinions. Well, that's about it. If any of you want to further this discussion, I'd be glad to partake in it. Oh, and there are also that false compromise egalitarians. These are a different bunch to be addressed separately. They are completely different because they don't linger on pyrotechnical terminology for their arguments. You can just argue with them on the various issues. Cut off prevention, motherfuckers.